Hello and welcome to the Friday wrap up here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is February 21st, 2025. We're going to be looking at Bitcoin as always and kind of taking a look at where the daily is after a pretty bloody Friday across not just crypto but traditional markets as well. And we'll kind of look to our 5-day again as it's going to be closing, I believe, with the weekly candle. And we'll kind of see where things are on the daily first, and talk about a few things. There was obviously the Bybit hack. Apparently, it's by the Lazarus Group. Doesn't really matter who it was by. It's the fact that they got hacked for about $1.5 billion in ETH assets. So that's obviously not good. That is not the complete picture of what has happened today market wide, as there was also some news coming out of China that rocked the markets to the downside. And you can guess what kind of news that was when I tell you that the only stocks that were really green today were pharmaceutical companies. So, look, I'm not too keen on a repeat of what happened in 2020, and I think that this is maybe taking advantage of some options expiring on Friday, along with some tensions when it comes to trade negotiations. So we'll see what comes of it. As of right now, Bitcoin, well, it's still in a range. And in fact, there is some opportunity here, considering that Bitcoin is in a very compressed state on the daily, as well as that 5-day. So I do think that we can start to look at this daily price action now to get a lead on where the 5-day might head next as well. And then, of course, we can pair that in with the weekly, as I talked about on Wednesday when talking about volatility compression. So we've got, we still have, a downtrend here, but we do have a bit of a trend break. So here on the daily, we have our first, higher high since, I don't know, when was our last higher high? I mean, it's our first higher high since back here at the actual all-time high, right? So it's been all lower highs and, lower low swings here. But we do have our first higher high in this tag of the upper second standard deviation. We did not, we'll just kind of make this a yellow horizontal ray here at that 98,890, so basically $99,000. We did see a higher high come in on the day with this tag of the upper second around 99,500. Now, we did talk about this area briefly on Wednesday as well. So there is opportunity here. One of the big things, though, is I don't really want to see Bitcoin closing below 95,600 on the daily. That would put it below the lower first, and then testing the Friday wick low. Of course, it's still Friday for me, but the Saturday session is open. And, I would be looking for any kind of closures below the lower first and this close open low that was just set at 95,600. Well, I would be looking for that lower second, somewhere around 94 to 94.5 is fair game. And of course, we have down here below there, if we start seeing closes, we would get expansion into this low side here at around that 93.5 to 93.3 and anywhere below there. And I suspect we'll see Bitcoin playing down into an area that I'm going to talk about here in just a moment by turning on our local support and resistance areas or areas of interest to the upside and downside. You can see that Bitcoin is again hanging out in this $96,000 range. Of course, if it drops that lower first, I am looking for a retest of, that 94.5 or so, possibly down to $94,000 somewhere around, or possibly even below the lower second standard deviation, which is currently coming in at 94.4. Now, if we do see Bitcoin closing below here, then I would look for another run down to the weekly close open higher low. This is the last higher low on the weekly on a closing basis, not the swing. The actual higher low swing on the weekly is down here at $89,000, right in our red zone here. If we did start to lose this area, at, around 93.5, and especially closing below this 93.3 area, then I would look for Bitcoin to start heading down to test $92,000 at the top side of our red zone here. And anywhere below there, even in some lower term time frames, you can start to look towards that, 91 to 91.5, and possibly all the way down to retest this low at 89. If this is dropped on the daily, there is this higher low from the initial expansion up into this range, sitting right at our 1.168 or 16.8% above our prior cycle fib pull from $69,000 to 15.5. So this would put it 16.8% above $69,000 there at 88,700. That is where we did find a nice higher low after a little bit of sideways consolidation on the daily. Anywhere below there, you can look to the close open down here. It's not marked here on my chart, but 88, 300 to 400, depending on your chart, down to $85,000. That is that's a pretty steep move, and that would start to paint a picture to the downside of expansion, not just on the daily, but possibly on higher term timeframes. So that's where then below $85,000, which just so happens to be this wick low, it was the first bear candle after the expansion out of the previous range here. So after the big expansion up, we got our first bearish candle, that low coming in at $85,000. Now, this is not necessarily a significant level on higher term time frames. So if Bitcoin did by chance head down to this area, lose the $89,000, lose this daily level at 88,700, where we got the $89,000 front run here, then I would be looking for $85,000, and I would want to see the daily start closing back inside of this red zone here, this 1.168. Now to the upside, because we do have a swing higher high structure in place here. This is going to kind of be the criteria here by the upper second standard deviation. All Bitcoin really did was bounce between the upper second and lower second here on the daily for the Friday candle. Big dump off day for traditional markets. Now, Dow Jones wasn't in higher high structure. It's more in a consolidation structure, but we did previously just see NASDAQ and SPY make new all-time highs. The daily, they are breaking structure. It seems to the, their uptrending structure. So they are in a bit of a breakdown position, but we'll see how the weekend progresses in terms of the news narratives coming into Monday. We'll see what Monday has in store for us for traditional markets. I might even check on it on Monday. I'm not going to check on it today. I want to see how the crypto markets trade over the weekend. But in this case, back to the upside here, if we do see Bitcoin back above the basis, which is currently at right around $97,000, and that was essentially our criteria for closing a higher low on a closing, or no, I'm sorry, not a higher low. This was just for closing the low, and that's that swing low. Solidify that down at 93.3 right there, just below the weekly higher low structure. And then, of course, we had the lower low close here, but closing the Thursday candle actually set this low. And there's not too much interesting about this low other than we did see a higher high, but it was on a bear candle. So we would need to see, preferably Bitcoin closing above that, 95.5, 95.6 area, and then going and taking out the 99,500 up here or so by that upper second to start getting expansion, take out this wick at 100,235, and then head up to the overhead resistance at 101 to 104. And then, then we can look for, obviously that would be expansion into overhead resistance, just like any closes below the lower second would be expansion into support. Not just this daily support, of course, and a major fib level, but also a big weekly higher low close. So, either way, the daily is looking for expansion either into support or into overhead resistance, and it's getting pretty tight here for the range. All things considered, it's still highly volatile. Now, if we did start to see expansion above this 1272 or 27.2% above the prior cycle high right here at the top side, just around 104. Then I would look between 104 and 106, and 106 to 108. And then, of course, it would be in full-on expansion, plus getting ahead or getting outside of overhead resistance to go test the all-time high and higher. Not too much more to say on that. I'm getting a lot of DMs like, are you concerned? Is this cooked? Is this all over? No, structure's fine. We haven't even put in a monthly high yet on a close. So we have on a swing, but not on a close. So, and last higher low on Bitcoin, of course, I'll reference this next week, but last higher low on Bitcoin still at $49,000 on a swing. So we're pretty far away from that. I'm not looking for any structural breaks. That doesn't mean that it doesn't get nasty to the downside if Bitcoin does break down from this range, but macro structure would still be bullish. So not really that concerned about it, to be quite honest. Cheaper Bitcoin is kind of what I would like to see. That doesn't mean that we're going to get it. We're just in a range. I will say it every single time. All right, daily momentum is hovering just above the bearish control zone here of a regular stochastic momentum indicator. Pivots at 95,140. So Saturday candle close above there. Momentum remains to the upside. Again, got to see this $96,000 area. In general, high $95,000 to $96,000 you want to see hold by that lower first. And, it looks, okay to at least try for upside. Doesn't really mean much until we see essentially that $99,500 to $100,000 taken out to the upside. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of support and resistance and that horizontal line there. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 2-day because we just had a 2-day closure. Excuse me. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the 2-day and we'll work our way up to that 5-day. So because we did just to get a 2-day closure, I think it is important to see where things are. Did close below the lower first, but 2 days in a range. And you can see how the upper bands, upper second and third, kind of catching the highs up there. Lower second and third catching just one of the lows with the lower second catching the rest. And you see Bitcoin's kind of hovering around the lower first standard deviation away from the basis band, which is the 20 simple moving average. This is going to close not on Sunday. This is the Saturday candle, so this will close on Monday. I would like to see Bitcoin recovering at minimum above the lower first. I'll close at 96.2 to give it the opportunity back to the basis band that was just retested bearishly in the last 2-day session. And again, that's at 95.5 or 99.5, sorry. Then above there, I'm looking at the upper first at 102.8. Right in the middle of that that 101 to 104 yellow zone that I was just showing on the daily. That kind of primary tighter resistance overhead. And of course, if we did see the lower second breach below, we would be looking at expansion. I'm not too bullish on it being expansion to the downside, like in earnest, unless it got close over closes below $93,000 here to go and test the lows. But obviously, we'll kind of gauge that as it goes, as it is obviously below the basis band on the 2-day. And as long as it's below there, it's technically in bear territory for expansion posture at the moment. But that can change very, very quickly as, Bitcoin's just kind of hanging around supports here. 3-day, do we have a 3-day close? We might as well just go through these. Yeah, so 3-day is going to be closing the same with the 2-day here on Monday. And in fact, when I record that video, it's going to be after the close of the Monday session. So might as well look at this one. Lower first tap. Again, that's coming in at like 94.5, 94.6. Basis band there at 98.650. So again, got to get above there. Got to head for that upper first. Looks very similar to the 2-day. Now, in flipping between these, we've got the 2-day has the potential to turn up. It is actually kind of turned up. It's not fully turned up here. 95,525 on the next close. So by Monday's, the close of the Monday session, you do want to see, you want to see this. Well, I guess, you want to see this. Monday. It would be the Monday session. I'm just making sure. You do want to see this closing above 95.5 essentially for the 2-day. Let's take a look at the 3-day for momentum as well. We've got 97,420. Nice. You know, same kind of deal for the 3-day here. Not too much going on. Let's go ahead and look at the 4-day. 4-day session did just open. Very low volatility, setting up a range. Obviously, lower first there at 94,775, so just below 95 there. We've got the lower second wick catcher right there at the low $91,000 region. Whereas the basis band, it is at 98,274. Upper first right there at 101,800, so inside of that yellow zone that I've been talking about, and then 105 up there by the highs. Not too much to make of that at the moment. Nice compression though. We see the same thing, of course, on this 5-day, which is the important one. This has 3 days to go, so my apologies. This is going to be closing on Tuesday, so we will check on this one on Monday as well. This is going to be interesting. We don't want to see this closing below 94,431 in this case, the lower first. That would start to give the look that this is going to run around the lower second, which is right around this low here in the low $91,000 region. It's just right around that area at 90,800, which if we saw close below here, it would be closing below this low wick of this bear candle and headed for that $89,000 test in my personal opinion. Back to the upside, basis band, we're at 98. Need to go test that upper first at 101.6. Now we're starting to get towards the edge, bottom edge of that overhead yellow zone between 101 and 104 that I was showing earlier. Upper second is going to be 105. So cutting right across the actual closing higher high. And of course, we are still in higher high, higher low territory here, even in this consolidation for the 5-day. That is not the same look on the weekly though. But I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on this 5 days. I do think it's going to give us our edge for what's possibly going to occur during the weekly. And in this case, I'd like to see by Sunday, it would be nice if Bitcoin can at minimum close back above the 5-day basis, especially coming into, the new week next week. So I'll be watching this carefully, and I'll update you again on Monday on where things are. Of course, momentum here, we're looking at 104, 104,740 here. That's pretty far away in terms of pivot, but, it's still in a compression like this, price can bounce around before actually resolving the compression. And we need to see close over close expansion below the lower second that breaks down below 89 here, to then actually, call it the move is on. Same for the upside. We need to see close over close on the 5-day above the upper second, 105,200. That can also take out the all-time high at 109, which would put above the upper second and third and really start to, that would be a big expansive move in this case. So definitely something to pay attention to. Let's go ahead and look at this weekly. And then we'll go wrap things up on the daily by looking at RSI. I know I kind of went out of order, but you can see the weekly basis band is in range here, and you can see it's 90,575. And just to kind of put that in perspective, we can go ahead and turn on the local support and resistance zones, right? You can see that the basis band is essentially, right around the middle of our red zone here. So you definitely don't want to see that being dropped on a close for the weekly. Dailies are fine to swing down below there, but weeklies closing below there going to give, the bias that not only will the range lows be tested, not just the weekly low, but, the range lows on the daily there at that 88,700, but likely that daily 85, and it would give the bias to possibly testing where I think the lower first is going to end up after the close this week, which is somewhere around $80,000. And that's where, below 85, looking mid to low 80s, right? That's not as bearish as people think it would be. If it got there, again, this is just potential for downside. The upside here, though, you can see pretty clearly as it stands right now. I do expect the upper first to pass the top side of our yellow zone up here, 101 to 104. But it's right around 104 by our 1272. So be aware that even when Bitcoin, if it does hold this area around 96, holds the weekly close open, all that good stuff, if it does trek back to the upside, and head into this overhead resistance, just be aware that it's confluent with where not only is the upper first now, but I do believe it's going to kind of skate right across as we're moving from expansion to compression. And understand that even on closes above there that clear the overhead resistance and the all-time high, we have the upper second standard deviation going into a compression. So somewhere around $115,000 is likely going to be initial resistance on any kind of a breakout on the daily as it relates to the weekly to the upside. You can also see that above there, even if it got extreme, we're headed into a compression upper thirds right there by another major fib by the 1414, right around $128,000 to $130,000. So, on breakouts to the upside, I would look for, moves up and then retest possibly, and then, head back up and get a full compression, and then try to get that re-expansion to the upside, especially because this is only just starting to go from expansion into compression. We are experiencing really low volatility. It's telling me we probably have a week or two, probably this next week and the week after, first part of March, are going to be likely candidates for, observing how this compresses and possibly looking for etchings of re-expansion as it starts to develop. And that kind of lines up with what I've said on Wednesday. For the 5-day, I'm looking probably 10 to 15 days to start getting that signal to start showing for expansion, like true expansion. Could it happen sooner? Sure. But as it stands right now, it's fine. There's nothing really concerning me with Bitcoin right now in terms of price action. There's a lot of fear in the market. I'm not that concerned at this particular moment. It is lining up for a bigger move soon, right? Daily showing that it's getting ready. 2-day, 3-day, 4-day are kind of in a range. 5 days, 4 and 5 day are really compressed and are likely going to give us an early indication of which areas and on the weekly price is likely to test. At the extremes, I do think, probably around 80, mid to low 80s, depending on where this lower first is. Could it go for more in an extreme scenario and retest the prior highs of this big consolidation last year? Sure. Fair game. Doesn't do much. Maybe it's exciting for the bears and you can have some fun and you can get some short trades, but it doesn't do much in the macro picture, at least right away. And even to the upside, things could get very volatile in resolving this range to the upside, but I do think it's going to take a little bit of time. Kind of like when we saw over here, we saw initial, kind of flirting with breaking out, and then finally it breaks out and goes on its expansion. I'd like to see some more compression on the weekly. So if we do start to see things happen a little bit quicker on the daily and 5-day, we are going to be referencing the weekly and even higher term timeframes for the volatility levels of interest and kind of where they're confluent. But yeah, Bitcoin's holding up great. Markets took an absolute shit on themselves. Traditional markets just racing down. Again, NASDAQ, SPY, they're just coming off their all-time highs. So the highs confirmed, big race down. Could it turn into a deviation of trend, with breaking the daily higher low structure? Sure. And then we'll kind of monitor that. That is going to be interesting to watch. I'll leave you with this. Everybody's kind of making a big deal about, what's going on in the news. But one of the things that nobody's talking about is that Dixie broke a range on a really tight range that it's been in for a long time. Again, we're on a weekly here. It's been in a range between, essentially, you can call it, high 99 to 100 bucks to that 106 to 107, low 107 area with a swing up at that 108. Well, it deviated and broke out on expansion and then came back, and it's now mean reverted. This is actually what I'm going to be watching very closely here as we come into the end of the month and all throughout March, because it is now, a lot of people are very bearish on Dixie, like, oh, it's falling apart. Well, yeah, it's pulling back, but this is mean reversion right now. So if it does bounce from here, what we want to see is lower highs, because it's still in, higher high, higher low structure right now. And this is where if it bounces here and then takes out its highs, it's going for it up here, right? Which means the dollar's pretty damn strong. And what you'd want to see if it loses this area, you want to see it head down 104, 105 by the lower first here. Or if it holds this area, you want to see lower highs, like a lower high bounce retest into this compression and then dump out back into this range down here. That would be preferred. And this is going to take a while to play out for Dixie. And understand that if it's going to take a while for Dixie to play this out, it's going to take a while for traditional markets and crypto to kind of figure out what Dixie's doing for risk on, risk off stuff. And we'll kind of go from there. I'll talk to you again on Monday. Don't get too discouraged. The majors have held up pretty damn well. I know Ethereum took a massive hit. Yep. That's to be expected considering what was happening. But even it held up pretty well. I mean, its last major low area was like 2100, right? So, and it could retest that area very easily. And it kind of doesn't do much unless it breaks down. So, crypto markets, believe it or not, maybe the meme coins didn't hold up very well, but crypto markets in general holding up just fine. We'll see what the next week brings and if that remains true. And with that, I will wish you a wonderful weekend, a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. And I'll talk to you on Monday. Take care of yourselves. Nighty out.